welcome to our Bachelor of Science Program in Nutrition Science virtual open house. I should ask first, can everybody see the slides? Great, okay. So you might be asking yourself, first of all, well, what is nutrition science in the first place? What does this even mean? Well, nutrition science is the study of how food and nutrients affect the body. And so that's a big focus of what you're going to learn in the program is the science of food and nutrition and how we can help people, how we can help improve health, prevent diseases through food and nutrition. Now, an important point I have on the slide here, and I hope we don't lose some people, but we might. So we do have two nutrition programs at Pitt, and we're both housed in the exact same department, the Department of Sports Medicine and Nutrition, which is in the School of Health and Rehab Sciences. But I'm going to be talking about the BS in Nutrition Science. There is a different program called the Registered Dietitian Nutritionist Program. So if that's what you're interested in, you want to be a dietitian nutritionist, that's your path, then you're at the wrong virtual open house. And you could certainly email me and I will give you the information for that open house, which is actually tomorrow night. So these are two different programs. The program I'm talking about is really not for someone who that's their goal. But we do have a program in our department for those individuals. So the nutrition science program is a perfect fit if you are interested in food and nutrition, you like to learn about nutrition, you like to learn about food, an interest in cooking, and in particular, if you really have an interest in how food affects health. So if that's really your interest, it's a perfect program. If you have a interest in disease prevention and management through nutrition and lifestyle change, then this is a perfect major for you. And nutrition plays a role in, I actually can't even think of a disease where nutrition doesn't have some role, where it's not part of the prevention, or maybe it actually caused the problem or worsened it, or it's part of the management or symptom management. It's really hard. I teach our nutrition and disease class. It's really hard to think of anything where nutrition doesn't play a role. And so just some examples. So nutrition, how we eat, plays a major role in preventing cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes, certain cancers, not all cancer, but certain cancers like breast and colon cancer have a lot of nutrition risk factors, preventing osteoporosis, preventing dental caries in children. For those of you interested in going into dentistry, definitely a role in preventing dental caries. As I mentioned, nutrition can also contribute to diseases. So specifically, nutrition deficiency diseases. So developing pernicious anemia due to B12 deficiency, or again, thiamine deficiency. So nutrition can lead to disease. And then for management of disease, many diseases, a major part of the management is nutrition. So if we think of most of our diseases of the gastrointestinal tract, there's always nutrition therapy, whether it's ulcers, reflux, celiac disease, Crohn's disease. A major part of the treatment is what we eat and trying to modify that. As I already mentioned, a number of diseases like heart disease and diabetes, but other disorders, chewing disorders, swallowing disorders, pulmonary disorders, rheumatic disorders. Again, there's just so many diseases where we might use nutrition along with medical care as part of the management. And that is an important part of the BS in Nutrition Science program. We are a science program and we're evidence-based. So what we are teaching is going to go along with evidence-based medicine, evidence-based dentistry, evidence-based occupational therapy. We're teaching evidence-based practice, not fad diets and things like that. So we are evidence-based. So let's say you do choose to major in nutrition science for your undergrad. Well, what could you actually do with it? Let's get to the practical part. Well, it is an ideal undergraduate major for individuals who want to go on to health-related graduate programs. So you want to use this background in nutrition to further your career or basically have additional knowledge than your colleagues in a specific area. And so, for example, students who are planning to go to medical school, this is a great option. Same with physician assistant studies. I had already mentioned dentistry, but also students who would want to study occupational therapy or physical therapy, because there's a lot of connections. Again, there's a lot of connections, diseases of the joints, the bones that we'll talk about, and also graduate programs in public health and epidemiology. And I think the program really provides a unique background that sometimes might distinguish you, again, from other applicants for your graduate program. Again, learning specifically about nutrition and nutrition for prevention and management of diseases. Now, another option, maybe that's not what you're interested in. You're not planning to go to graduate school for a health-related career. Other things you could do with a degree in nutrition science, you could go straight into working in jobs in the food industry or the supplement industry. You could go into research, so doing research related to nutrition. Public health, also a great background for pharmaceutical sales. So a lot of different options, again, for someone who would complete the nutrition science program. All right, so what are the prerequisites for the program? So the way the nutrition science program works, you take your prerequisite courses in the freshman and sophomore years that you are at Pitt, or again, if someone's at a different college, and then you actually come to us as a junior. And so these are the prerequisites for students who are going to apply this spring to start in the fall. So if you're a sophomore right now, at sophomore in college, and you're going to be starting or want to start in the fall. Now, there are some changes. You may have seen a different list of prerequisites. You might be like, hey, I see some classes are missing. We have tried to reduce our number of prerequisites to make it a little easier for students to complete the prereqs and apply. We're trying to be flexible and accommodate more students. So a couple different classes that are not on this list are microbiology, which we used to require as a prereq, and a second writing course called an intensive writing course. Now, what we did with those two classes, because they're vital for the program, we just moved them into the program. So you don't have to take them before, you can take them in the program. Now, maybe you've already taken them. That's fine. That just means when you're in the program, you'd have an elective instead of microbiology. Or if you took an advanced writing course like research writing or writing for the sciences. So we did slim the list down a bit. And you can always email me if you want to, discuss that in more detail, but we're just trying to make it a little easier. But what you'll see, the prereqs are very science heavy, and that's because it's a science program. But for those of you who are planning on applying to graduate programs in health fields, a lot of these prerequisites are the same. You're going to have to take these biologies and chemistries and organics if you're going on into a health career. So you're kind of covering whatever it is, the two birds with one stone situation. So we do require that you take both biology 1 and 2 and a biology lab. You do need to take general chemistry 1 and 2, both with lab. And we require organic chemistry 1 and 2. But we do have one sort of exception here. At the University of Pittsburgh, there is a class, it's Chem 350, Chem 350 Principles of Organic Chemistry. It's offered in the fall at main campus. We will, in our program, accept that instead of both of the organics. So if organics not really your, maybe your strength or interest, you could take that Chem 350, just 1 3-credit class, and we would count that as meeting the organic chemistry requirements. The only thing I would suggest, though, is make sure you know for your future career what they are requiring. So, for example, if it's medical school, they're going to require both. Physician assistant school at Pitt, I think they only require 1 organic chemistry. So you just need to know, okay, what do I need for if I'm going to dental school or, pharmacy or wherever you're going, what do you need? Then we have Intro to Nutrition. And the course we would recommend, it's NUTR 1006. There's another Intro to Nutrition class at Pitt, SHRS 1006. You can take either. But we are recommending the NUTR 1006 specifically for students who are going to apply to our nutrition programs, but you could take either. And if you're trying to get in the class and you're having difficulty, the NUTR one, just email me and I will get you the permission code. And that is taught in the fall and spring online, and it's always online. But then we have kind of standard prereqs that most programs have: English, math, statistics, and then our school, the School of Health and Rehab Sciences, requires 6 credits of humanities or social science classes. So those would be our prerequisites for those of you applying to start in the fall. Now, again, we have a second list, so a little more changes. So for those of you who are freshmen or in high school, and you're thinking that you're going to apply later to start in fall 2023 as a junior or later, there are some additional changes. And that's because our school, the School of Health and Rehab Science, has changed the general education requirements. So for the program, the list is the same. But again, our school, SHRS, has made some additional requirements for all students applying to majors in our school. And so they have added an oral communication class, so like public speaking. And then for this, what I have in bold, basically what they did, they just split where they used to say 6 credits of humanities or social sciences. Now the school is specifically saying 1 course in sort of the humanities, literature, arts, language, ethics, and then 1 course in social sciences. So they just sort of split it out. And SHRS also requires general education requirements in the area of diversity and also global awareness. But we have a course in the program that covers both of those. So you could certainly, as a freshman or sophomore, take a class in diversity and take a class in global awareness. But just so you know, we have a class in the program that would meet both. And so if you haven't had a chance to take those, you are fine. All right, so let's talk about what you're actually going to learn. I think that's what you're mainly here for. What are you going to learn in this program? So it's a 2-year program. Again, you would start as a junior. So when accepted, you start at the fall term as a junior and you do 2 years with us. We don't have any required summer classes. So the summer is your own, to do what you want to do. So looking at some of the classes, so first, I just want to point out, again, it is science-based. So you are going to take a number of sciences. In the fall term of the junior year, you take human physiology, you take biochemistry. In the fall term of the senior year, you take genetics. This is where we have microbiology. We moved it in, but again, if you already took microbiology, that's fine. And you just take something else instead of microbiology. And then in the spring term of the senior year, you take a class called pathophysiology, where you learn all about diseases. So again, really great for those of you going into health graduate fields. You go in with kind of a leg up on already having a class learning about disease. Now for the nutrition classes, I won't go through all of them, but just to point out some of them, in the fall term of the junior year, you'll have a class called nutrient metabolism, where you'll learn all about the different nutrients, macro and micronutrients, where you find those in food, how we absorb and metabolize them, what happens if you're deficient, what happens if you excessive amounts. So really in-depth knowledge on nutrients. In the spring term, some of the classes you'll have nutrition critical thinking, which is a great class. It's a very interactive class. It's small and you kind of debate where you look at current research and really learn how do we look at a research study done on nutrition and determine if it seems valid and good research methods. And that's one thing that is unfortunately a big problem in the field of nutrition is there's just tons of quackery. Just, people promoting various fad diets or supplements saying this will improve your diabetes, this will cure that. And so this class helps you to really look and critically think at claims and research and things in the media to be able to determine, does this seem valid or not? Another class you'll have in the spring term of the junior year is nutrition therapy. I teach that class. And in that class, we learn about diseases and then the role of nutrition. So if someone has celiac disease, how do we help them? If someone has cancer and they're having horrible nausea and vomiting, how do we help them? If someone has gout, how do we help them? So that's real, that class we really learn, what do we actually do evidence-based? A couple other classes I want to point out. In the fall term senior year, we have a class called Life Cycle Nutrition. I think that's one of the favorite classes in our program for both the nutrition science students and the dietitian nutritionist students. And a great class, I think, for anyone in any, with any interest in anything, because you really learn, like it sounds like, from infancy through being an older adult, nutritional needs, nutritional issues. So real practical stuff like, what do you feed an infant? Maybe you're working with in your career, pregnant women, and pregnant women ask questions, can I eat fish or not? So you learn really in-depth and issues in those classes. So what's nutrition therapy for, children with certain diseases? So again, just a great class. And then I just wanted to point out, we have our food and culture class. That's the class that is going to cover both diversity and global awareness and cultural awareness. So we learn all about different types of foods based on different areas of the world, ethnicity, religion. And also I just wanted to point out the practical experience course. In that course, you'll spend 6 hours a week in a real world setting, getting experience applying you are assisting with a research study related to nutrition or doing projects with a food or supplement company. And the last thing I wanted to point out is the electives. So we currently have, starting next year, 9 credit elective in the program, and we purposely put these in the program because we know that those students going to graduate school very likely still have prereqs they have to take. So maybe you're applying to dental school and you need physics, or you need additional organic chemistry labs, or you need advanced psychology classes. We purposely put these in here so you do have spots to take other prerequisites. And for those students who don't need, let's say, you're not going to graduate school, you don't need any prerequisites, we have focused electives that we would recommend based on your goals. So not just, okay, just take whatever. It'd be like, let's find something that's going to help you with if you want to go into the food industry or whatever your goal is. So a little bit about the student experience. Our program is small. We are new. We just have our 3rd year of students starting. Our dietitian nutritionist program has been running forever, well, not that exact program, but our program for dietitians. But the nutrition science program is new and we are small and growing. So your class sizes will be small. Many of your classes you would take with the dietitian nutritionist students, and those classes, the typical class size might be 25 students. Your science classes you would take with larger groups, but that makes it so it's much more personalized. You will absolutely know all of your professors. You will know the director, me. You will know your advisor. And so you can get a lot of personalized attention. That also is very helpful when it comes to applying to graduate schools. As I'm sure you know, again, when you're in big classes and it's hard to find someone to write you a recommendation letter because they just know your grade in the class, well, your instructors are going to know you. And so I think that's a huge plus. We really do focus on personalized education and advising. So I mentioned with the electives, with the practical experience, we really try to tailor stuff for your interests. We have a student organization. It's called the Student Dietetics Association, but both students in the nutrition science program and students in the dietitian nutritionist program are members. And then we have lots of opportunities to volunteer and get involved that we send out to all students for those who are interested. So for the admission requirements and process, so as I mentioned, you apply as a sophomore in the beginning of your sophomore year. You wouldn't want to apply before that because we need your grades from the fall term. And so you could certainly apply January or February, but the due date's March 15th. You must have completed a minimum of 60 college credits, including all the prereqs I mentioned. But with those prereqs, you could certainly be completing them in the spring term of your sophomore year. So they don't have to be done before you apply. And if you had one or two outstanding prereqs you are confident you could complete in the summer, that could be considered. I would say email me ahead of time just so we can confirm that. If you had like 4 prereqs you were going to try to take in the summer, then my recommendation is going to be apply the next year. But we could, we'll try to work with you if it's like 1 or 2. We have a minimum GPA to apply of 2.5, but just being realistic, most of our applicants' GPA is considerably higher than 2.5. You can certainly apply with 2.5, but we're hoping for 3.0 and up. And you do need to have a minimum grade of a C- in all prerequisite courses if you take them at Pitt. You could certainly repeat it if you earned a D in a class and you retook it and got a C- or higher, that's fine. And if you take the classes at any other school, so a different college you were at, CCAC, anywhere, it does have to be a C. And then you do need to submit 1 letter of recommendation. That could be from one of your professors. It could be from your advisor. It could be from a work or volunteer supervisor, someone who can speak to you, again, either your academic performance, your work ethic, and then a personal statement. And with the personal statement, I would aim for 1 to 2 pages max. It doesn't need to be longer. And what we're looking for there is for you to express, why are you interested in the nutrition science program? And what are your goals? What are your plans? That's very important for me to see. Are you a good fit for the program? And sometimes I catch I think this person should be applying for the dietitian nutritionist program instead. And that way I can contact you and make sure you're applying for the right program. So why are you interested and what are your professional goals? So on this slide, I just have my contact information. So I have my email address. You can email me at any time with any kinds of questions. And I have our website, which has again, all the information I just presented is also on the website. So now I would like to turn it over to Annie. Again, Annie will introduce herself, but she is a senior in our program, and she's going to talk about the program from her perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Cherok. Hi, everybody. My name is Annie Krisselbrink. As Dr. Cherok said, I'm a senior in the nutrition science program. I just want to say thank you, everybody, for coming. We're really excited to have you. So just a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm a senior and I'm hoping to go to a grad program for physician assistant studies. I recently applied and I'm waiting to hear back. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely feel free to reach out to me. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about my perspective in the program and applying to the program. So first of all, I'm going to touch on some things that we already kind of talked about, but really kind of emphasize them because I feel like as a student, they're really important to me. So with the nutrition science program, there's definitely a lot of flexibility to take prerequisites for like graduate school options like med school and PA school, which are the 2 I'm most familiar with. But we also have currently in our program as a junior, a student that wants to go to dental school as well. So there's a lot of room that you can use these elective spaces to take prereqs for grad programs, which is super nice because there are a lot of other programs at Pitt, obviously for pre-health students, but they don't have as much flexibility, in my opinion, to get all of your prerequisites in time. So a little bit more about me is whenever I first came to Pitt, I was really interested in doing any program in SHRS. I was actually interested in another program because it provided a lot of hands-on experience, which you do need for PA school. But while that was a great choice, there wasn't a lot of elective space. So it would have been really hard to get all the prereqs for PA school. And at the time I was also between pre-med, so that as well. And just by chance, I happened to meet Dr. Cherok whenever I was getting a permission code for Intro to Human Nutrition. And she was telling me a little bit about this new program, and it just seemed perfect for me. And I have to say, I absolutely love it. And I think it was the right choice for myself. I want to emphasize something that she said as well, that it provides a super unique background that not many healthcare providers have. So I currently work as a patient care tech at West Penn Hospital, if you're familiar with the area. And I've often had a lot of nurses and other techs and doctors even tell me, oh, wow, that's really interesting that you're doing nutrition as your undergrad, because like as a nurse, we don't really have to take that many nutrition classes. And I feel like that's a really important aspect of healthcare, as you'll see. So as I mentioned and kind of touched on, nutrition is an important aspect in many fields like pre-med, pre-PA, pre-dental, if you're interested in food science, pharmacy, anything like that. So we can go ahead and switch. Okay, so then, like I said, I am a PCT at West Penn Hospital, and before I worked in a nursing home. And before working in these areas, I never really realized how much nutrition really impacts everybody from infants to elderly. So working in long-term care, I was able to see firsthand just how much nutrition status affects a person's physical and mental health. So those who were depressed would maybe stop eating and drinking, causing them to deteriorate both physically and mentally. And then some had diseases such as dementia, in which they forgot to eat or didn't know how because of how confused they were. So it's also really important to know what a patient eats and drinks in a day, to know and understand what nutrients they are digesting and what they might be missing in their diet. And having this background in nutrition really gives you that insight into what might be wrong with your patient. So like I said, knowledge of nutrition is important for everyone working in healthcare, from techs to doctors. And that was kind of my little input on that. But if you have any questions about applying to the program, courses in the program, working as a PCT or PA school or anything, please feel free to reach out. I really do enjoy helping others with scheduling and just kind of advising them in what to do when applying, because I know I had some trouble my freshman and sophomore years. So I'd be more than happy to help you if you reach out. But thank you so much. And let me know if you have any questions.
All right, so I want to talk just a little bit about medical nutrition therapy for iron deficiency anemia, because it's a good example of what you would learn in the nutrition science program. So this is a little subset of a lecture that I do in the class I teach, nutrition therapy, that you would take in the spring term of the junior year. And I picked iron deficiency anemia because it's pretty common. And, maybe some of you here tonight have had iron deficiency anemia, or you know someone who's had iron deficiency anemia. So what is iron deficiency anemia? So it's a type of anemia that's called microcytic hypochromic, meaning the red blood cells are abnormally small and they don't have enough hemoglobin in them. And that's because we need iron to form hemoglobin. So there's many types of anemia. This is one type. Iron deficiency anemia is actually the last stage of iron deficiency. So if you've ever been diagnosed with this, or you know someone who has, they were deficient for a long time, because again, this is kind of the end stage, or not the end stage, but a later stage of iron deficiency is when you actually develop the problems with the red blood cells leading to anemia. It is the most common cause of anemia. There's many causes of anemia: genetics, side effects of diseases, other nutrient deficiencies, but this is the most common cause. And iron deficiency is the most common nutrition deficiency in the world. So there's lots of nutrition deficiencies, but this is the most common. It affects 25% of the world's population. It's still a problem in the US. We still see it in the US, but in other areas of the world, like developing countries in Asia and Africa, the rates are even higher. So it's more of a concern in some of our developing areas. So who is at risk to develop iron deficiency anemia? Menstruating women, because of the blood loss. And we know in blood is red blood cells. And what's in red blood cells? Hemoglobin, which contains iron. So if you're losing blood for any reason, you're losing iron. Pregnant women and women who are breastfeeding are at risk, and that's because they have higher needs. So that's just higher needs for iron, and that's something you would learn in the life cycle nutrition class in the program. Infants, toddlers, children, and adolescents have a higher risk of developing iron deficiency, again, due to higher needs. Whenever you're growing, when you have tissue growth, you need more red blood cells, and so you need more iron. Also, any condition that causes chronic blood loss, especially if it's blood loss that maybe is not readily visible. So someone's losing small amounts of blood from like the stomach or intestines chronically, but not enough that they know anything is happening, and then they don't go to the doctor. So a bleeding ulcer, if anyone's ever heard of ulcerative colitis, inflammatory bowel disease that causes bloody diarrhea. Colon cancer can cause small amounts of bleeding that, again, someone might not detect. And even something like taking aspirin chronically. If you ever notice when you take aspirin, it does irritate the stomach. And aspirin can really irritate the lining of the stomach and even lead to bleeding. And then our last category of individuals at high risk for iron deficiency are children living at or below the poverty level. So the combination of kids have higher needs for iron because they're growing, and if they're living at or below the poverty level, their risk for food insecurity is very high, and highly likely they are not going to be able to have enough food that has iron in it, especially if you think of the cost of like meat, could be a real problem. So what actually causes iron deficiency? So why would someone become deficient? Well, there's a bunch of different causes, and maybe some people have multiple of these. So one would be inadequate intake. They're just not, this person is not consuming food sources of iron for whatever reason, whether it's food insecurity, a poor appetite, not liking those foods, maybe being a vegan and not eating meat. Another cause of iron deficiency is inadequate absorption in the intestines. It's actually hard for the intestines to absorb all the iron that we eat. We actually don't absorb a lot of the iron we eat. And there are a number of different reasons for that. If someone has a condition called achlorhydria, and that term means a lack of production of stomach acid. And that actually happens as we get older. So some senior adults struggle with this. You just make less hydrochloric acid in your stomach as you get older. And acid, sometimes we think of it negatively, like if you have reflux or ulcers, but acid has its physiological purposes. And one is it converts iron to a more absorbable form. So if you don't have enough acid in your stomach, it's hard for you to then convert iron to an absorbable form and absorb it. Intestinal diseases where there's damage to the duodenum and jejunum in the small intestine, that's where we absorb iron. A good example of a disease that can cause damage in the small intestine would be celiac disease before it's diagnosed. And sometimes this is how people actually get diagnosed with celiac disease, is they have iron deficiency that is not getting any better with treatment. And it's because they're still malabsorbing. And then there are medications that will interfere with iron absorption. And that's a big thing we'll learn in the program too. Side effects of medications that can affect nutrition status. It might be increased loss of iron due to blood loss from any cause of blood loss. And as I mentioned, whenever anyone's growing, so again, kids, teenagers, pregnant women, you always have higher needs. So if your intake doesn't increase, you may not get enough. So just quickly, I wanted to go through sort of the stages of iron deficiency anemia. So the first stage is just called a negative iron balance. And what that means is your iron needs or your iron losses are greater than what you're taking in. So again, you're losing more iron than you are able to consume, or your needs are higher than what you're consuming. And what that's going to do first is start to deplete iron stores. So we store iron in many places in the body. We store it in the liver, we store it in the bone marrow. And there's a lab test that is an indicator of iron stores, and it's called serum ferritin. And that's really the best way to determine someone's iron status. There are many labs we can look at, but the thing about ferritin is it's going to be the first lab that's going to be abnormal when you are starting to have issues with iron. So this is something, if you have concerns about yourself, if you're sort of like, well, I'm a little worried, this is what I would ask my doctor to check, a serum ferritin, because it's going to decrease first because it's measuring stores. If we're waiting to see anemia lab problems, that's going to come way later. And so at this point, your hemoglobin level is normal, your red blood cells are still normal, you don't have anemia, and you don't have any signs or symptoms. So that's the other thing. You might not even know to ask your doctor unless you feel you have risk factors for it, like we just discussed. Then as the condition goes on, so nothing changes. So the person still is struggling with intake or increased losses. Then stage 2 is the iron stores become severely depleted. Then stage 3 is when we would technically say someone has iron deficiency, because now we have inadequate total body iron. And now we would start to see a decrease in so now serum iron is going to go down. Again, a couple before that was still going to be normal. And then stage 4 is when the individual now has actually developed anemia. So it's not just you're deficient in iron. Now your red blood cells are abnormal because they don't have enough hemoglobin. And this is where you start to feel symptoms. And so what are some symptoms? So those of you who've had iron deficiency or any kind of anemia, you might be familiar with these. The symptoms are due to cells in the body not getting enough oxygen, because that's what red blood cells do. They carry oxygen to our tissues and our cells, and where we carry the oxygen is the hemoglobin. So if we don't have enough hemoglobin, because we're iron deficient, we're not going to carry oxygen. So these are all complications of cells not getting enough oxygen and other functions of iron. Iron itself is involved in a lot of like enzyme functions in the body. So being really tired, fatigued, anorexia, that term means a loss of appetite. So sometimes you see the term anorexia nervosa, that's the eating disorder, anorexia nervosa, but the word anorexia just means loss of appetite for any reason. Some serious complications, if this goes on undiagnosed for children, they can have abnormal cognitive development, also not grow properly. And does anybody know what pica is, or ever heard of pica? Feel like if you know, just chime in if anyone wants to explain or whatever they've heard about pica. I know sometimes people have heard of pica. There used to be a show on, I don't even know if it's still on. I think it was called My Strange Addiction. And sometimes they would have pica on this. But pica is a situation where individuals crave to eat things that are not food. So craving to eat chalk, laundry starch. So this craving to eat, like you're hungry for, but it's not food. And that is thought to be a symptom of iron deficiency. So that's pica. Some additional clinical findings and symptoms would be defects in the structure and function of epithelial cells. So cells we have that line our mucous membranes and in our skin. And so some of the changes you might see is the individual's skin tone might be paler than their normal skin tone. So depending on your skin tone, this may be less or more predominant, but a paler skin tone than your normal skin tone. The mucous membranes, like in the mouth, will look a paler color. Some other findings, a condition called glossitis, which is where the tongue becomes inflamed. And that's actually caused by a number of nutrient deficiencies, not just iron, also some B vitamins. Angular stomatitis is inflammation in the corners of the mouth. And this is all due to, again, these epithelial cells not developing properly due to deficiency of oxygen. And then has anyone ever heard of koilonychia or have any idea what that word even means? Yeah, it's sort of a different word, but we'll get to it on the next slide. And then one of the most severe complications that can happen with iron deficiency anemia, if it's severe enough and the individual's going, again, a really prolonged period without being diagnosed, they can actually have heart failure because the heart is beating harder and harder and more often because it's trying to pump around more blood because it's trying to get more oxygen to the tissues. So over time, that can actually weaken the heart and cause failure. That would be, again, a severe situation. So what was the koilonychia I just mentioned? So it's a really specific physical sign of iron deficiency anemia where the fingernails become like scooped or spoon shaped. So if you look at these fingernails, if you can get a good look, they're kind of curved down and spoon shaped. So if you ever see anyone with that, they have iron deficiency anemia and you want to tell them they need to get to their doctor and then a nutrition specialist for help. So what are we actually going to do? So, what is the therapy to help someone who has iron deficiency anemia? Well, again, working with the physician assistant, we want to figure out, well, why did they have this in the first place? So what's the cause? Because that's really important. If the cause is undiagnosed celiac disease, that needs to be diagnosed and treated, and that's treated with a gluten-free diet. Or is the cause a medication that maybe the doctors could change, or is it intake? So we can't really help if we don't know the cause. We need to work together as a team and investigate. Then we need to replete their iron stores. And when we're repleting stores of a nutrient, we usually have to use supplements. In nutrition, we always say food first. We always want to go with food first. But when someone's deficient, we need to act more quickly. And we usually use supplements for a temporary period for high dose amounts to replete. And so usually what's recommended is an oral iron supplement. The most common one used is called ferrous sulfate. And ferrous is the more absorbable form of iron. If you ever see ferric sulfate, that's less absorbable. You want to go with ferrous sulfate. And to absorb iron supplements the best, you want to take them on an empty stomach. You actually have significantly reduced absorption of iron supplements if you take them with food. So for example, if you have a full stomach and you take an iron supplement, you usually only absorb about a third of the iron that's in the supplement. So you should try to take it on an empty stomach. But the problem is, if you've ever taken iron supplements, they can cause a lot of nausea. And so that's easier said than done to say, oh, take it on an empty stomach. Sometimes people take it and they feel nauseous. So what we would say in that case is take it with a little bit of food, and in particular, maybe a source of vitamin C. So a little bit more about iron supplementation. I already mentioned, again, nausea is a side effect. A major side effect of iron supplements is constipation. And sometimes people quit taking them because the constipation is so severe. So that's a negative of iron supplements, unfortunately. So we would, again, recommend some additional nutrition therapy for that. I have some information just on the slide about dosage for iron supplements for adults and children. And usually to replete iron stores takes a while. Like a week is not enough. Usually the individual is on iron supplements from anywhere to 3 to 6 months. And during that time, they should be going back to their doctor and getting their serum ferritin and iron and hemoglobin levels checked to make sure they're increasing. And if they're not, it's not working. So something's going wrong, like maybe they're not absorbing the supplement, or they're still having blood loss, or something is going on. So I think I pretty much just said that. So reasons why, sometimes people will be like, I've been on these supplements for 8 months, and the doctor says my iron levels aren't getting better. These are reasons. Again, we didn't really identify the right cause. Maybe they're just not taking them because of the side effects. They're still having bleeding. Maybe it's a woman with really heavy menstrual periods and just losing lots of blood and iron, or the iron supplement isn't being absorbed due to, again, a intestinal disease, or disorder. And in those situations, a physician can prescribe an intravenous infusion of iron if someone really can't absorb the supplements. All right, so where do we find iron in food? So yes, we're going to have to recommend supplements for the repletion period, but until the individual gets repleted, or the supplements will be used. But we want this individual to eventually get off the iron supplements and get iron from food. And so we have our sources of iron. Heme iron mainly comes from, completely comes from animal products. So things like liver, beef, poultry, pork, clams, and oysters. And heme iron is the most easy to absorb. So if you do eat these foods, you absorb the iron better. The intestines just absorb iron better when it's in this heme form. And there's also what's known as non-heme iron that we find more in vegetarian type sources. So in fortified cereal. So if you eat a cereal that has iron added, that's what that's going to be. It's also in dried peas and beans, so things like chickpeas, kidney beans, garbanzo beans, the skin of a baked potato, tofu, spinach, nuts, and lentils. So we do get iron from other foods besides meats. It's just harder to absorb it. So because of that, what are some things that we could recommend to help someone absorb iron better from their food? So you may have heard that vitamin C helps us to absorb iron better from food, and that's ascorbic acid is the official name for vitamin C. So if we consume sources of vitamin C, so again, we have fruits with vitamin C, citrus fruits, along with, again, food that has iron in it, that will help, and particularly if it's those non-heme sources where we need more help. And heme sources of iron, actually, if you eat those with non-heme, it helps increase the absorption of non-heme iron. Now, here's the tricky part. There are also components in food that inhibit iron absorption. And these I don't think are common knowledge. So for example, tannins in tea and coffee. So if you're drinking a lot of tea and coffee with your meals, and maybe that is with the main meals where you're going to get iron. So for example, maybe one of your main iron sources is you eat a cereal that's fortified with iron and you're having that with coffee. You're not going to absorb all the iron. So our recommendation would be drink your tea and coffee between your meals, separate from the iron. And then there's some other things in foods, phytates, which we find in whole grains, oxalates, phosphates, calcium. So unfortunately, a lot of the minerals compete with each other for absorption in the small intestine. So if you're eating a meal high in calcium or you're taking a calcium supplement, it's going to compete with the iron. And also a component called phosphatin, which is in egg yolk. So a lot of this is just about separating them. Again, trying to separate these from when you're having your iron sources. And then to finish up, what is our medical nutrition therapy? That's what MNT stands for, evidence-based nutrition therapy. We're going to educate on dietary sources of iron and how to increase our iron intake so that ideally we can get off the supplements, including sources of vitamin C at every meal, including sources of the heme iron at every meal if possible. Again, for some people, a vegan, that's not going to happen. Or maybe for other various reasons, someone's not going to have, one of these sources at every meal. Okay, but that would be a recommendation, but we would focus then on, again, more of our non-heme sources. And as I mentioned, avoiding drinking coffee or tea with meals with our iron.